GCSE Poetry, War and Conflict, the Emigree, and Poems to compare it to. In this video, we are going to be looking at 6 different things. To skip to different aspects of this video, make sure you look at their timestamps, or if you want to watch the whole video, here is what we're going to be doing. We're going to start with poem reading, then the summary, then looking at annotations, the poet context, language form and structure essay points, and poems to compare it to. The poem reading. Just want to say a quick thank you to the physics and maths tutor for access to their annotated poems. There once was a country. I left it as a child, but my memory of it is sunlight clear, for it seems I never saw it in that November, which, I am told, comes to the mildest city. The worst news I receive of it cannot break my original view. The bright, filled paperweight, it may be at war, it may be sick with tyrants, but I am branded by an impression of sunlight. The white streets of that city, the graceful slopes glow even clearer as time rolls its tanks and the frontiers rise between us, close like waves. That child's vocabulary I carried here like a hollow doll opens and spills a grammar. Soon I shall have every coloured molecule of it. It may by now be a lie, banned by the state, but I can't get it off my tongue. It tastes of sunlight. I have no passport. There's no way back at all, but my city comes to me in its own white plane. It lies down in front of me, docile as paper. I comb its hair and love its shining eyes. My city takes me dancing through the city of walls. They accuse me of absence. They circle me. They accuse me of being dark in their free city. My city hides behind me. They mutter death, and my shadow falls as evidence of sunlight. So here is a brief summary about the poem. It's about someone who's had to leave their country as a child and flee their country to be safe. They're looking back fondly whilst also lamenting the discrimination they had experienced in their new country. Here's a summary just talking about context, structure, language and key points. So let's look at the annotations. It begins with there once was country. Now the use of temporal dexis, which is talking about time, from the outset creates a childlike tone to the poem, because if you think about it, once upon a time is quite a childlike thing to talk about. Then again, it refers to that child's vocabulary, and the theme of language is used here to show how the narrator has not moved on from their childhood, that there's been no development. Sunlight clear. Now the theme of sunlight repeats quite often in this poem, and it's referred to repeatedly. The use of gustatory imagery shows the narrator's delight in the memory. I have no passport. This alludes to the pain and conflict inflicted by man-made borders. They accuse me, they accuse me. Now this use of emphatic repetition shows the persecution the narrator endures in their new home by creating a violent tone. So let's look at poet context. The poet's name is Carol Rummans. She was born in 1944 in London, but also lived in Belfast and Wales, as well as travelling widely throughout Russia and Eastern Europe. This aspect of her life is reflected in her writing, which is largely about foreign customs, culture and language. And I think in this poem it's really clear that we can see what she's referring to, what being foreign is all about. The Emigree. This poem is contained within the 1993 collection Thinking of Skins, which is centred on political consciousness in Russia and Eastern Europe. Within the collection there's also a focus on the relationship between identity and culture. Structure and form essay points. So firstly, repetition of they creates an aggressive and accusatory tone to make the city seem threatening and hostile. They're also personifying the city, and this reflects the aggression aimed at her from the very citizens of her new city. Accuse me of being dark. Now this is definitely racism that we can note here. This shows she's experiencing a new threat, which is no longer a physical conflict, but a social rejection. She also feels she does not belong in her new city, as she does not share their culture or their identity. However, she cannot return to her native country, leaving her in a very precarious position in which she experiences no sunlight. Rumens further emphasises her feelings of segregation throughout the poem in their city, and they accuse me of absence. There's also a sense of distance in the constant use and repetitive use of they, and it very much distances her or the person from everyone else. The last stanza. The last stanza can be interpreted to be a description of the narrator's new city. Rumens uses enjambment in through the city of walls to separate of walls from the rest of the text. This causes the reader to see walls as an isolated area, creating connotations of entrapment. The final stanza also contains caesura and free verse to create a sense of chaos, which could conversely be interpreted as indicative of freedom. Language essay points. An epistrophe is used, and this means the repeated use of a word at the end of a stanza or sentence. In this poem, every stanza ends with a reference to sunlight. Now, Rumens juxtaposes the positive connotations of sunlight with the negative connotations of branded, in but I am branded by the impression of sunlight. This shows how her love for her country will always overrule any feeling of pain caused by it, and it also represents and parallels the battle that's ongoing between her of love and hatred for a country and her home country. Now, there's also gustatory imagery, which is when they're talking about food and taste, and it's similarly positive as it shows a juxtaposition between both darkness and light. In my shadow falls as evidence of sunlight. Rumens' use of epistrophe in the poem demonstrates that no matter what she hears in the news, the speaker will always have a positive view of her city. Subjunctive cases are used. So when referring to the negative attributes of her city, the speaker uses the subjunctive case in it may be at war, it may be sick with tyrants. This shows how these flaws seem hypothetical to her, as she does not have a new perspective of her city besides what she has gained before she left as a child. Contrastingly, the negative traits of her new city and her feelings of fear are stated definitively. These flaws are shown to be more tangible in they mutter death, city of walls, and they accuse me. This shows her absolute certainty of the flaws of her city, but this is likely because she no longer has the naivety of childhood altering her perspective. Poems to compare it to. So the first poem, in this I've only talked about one poem because I think it's quite a strong comparison, so I would suggest you choose this. So comparing the Emigree and checking out me history. So in terms of similarities, there's both violent connotations in bandage up my own eye with my own history to allude to the conflict in that. And there's a similar conflict shown in Rumens' poem. However, there's definitely a higher sense of seriousness in Rumens' poem. Both poems attach great emotional significance to their cultural identity. Agard's repetition of "dem tell me" shows the anger the narrator feels at having had his heritage hidden from him. Likewise, Rumens appears to have maternal feelings towards her former home, and this is shown by the childlike lexis of "I comb its hair and love its shining eyes." The importance of language is seen and visible in Rumens' work, in child's vocabulary, which shows the narrator desperately clinging to the language of their childhood. Similarly, Agard uses a Creole language to represent the different cultures which have influenced him. Finally, differences. In checking out me history, the narrator demonizes his childhood through his angry tone and the separation of the stanzas to show how he was not educated sufficiently. Contrastingly, Rumens uses light imagery in An Impression of Sunlight, The White Streets, and A Taste of Sunlight to present dreamlike heaven idealized childhood. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, be sure to subscribe, and for more advice and videos on English, geography, French and RS, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching and see you soon.